Welcome to our Richmond Housing Committee meeting on October 30th, Halloween Eve, as my daughter said, at 7 o'clock, at 7:06 here. So everyone's on, welcome. The agenda was posted online. Any questions about the agenda? I know we have Eric has joined. I don't know if there was any thing specific you were hoping to contribute to the meeting tonight, Eric.
I'm just interested in learning a little bit about the committee and the work you're doing. So just sitting in.
Great, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only thing I might adjust is just to have the Planning Commission update before we talk about basically our next meeting schedule would be my only switcheroo there. But anything else from the agenda? No. Okay, perfect. All right, September meeting minutes. This is from our September 25th meeting. Any changes needed for the meeting minutes from last time, or are they good as they are written? I take that as they're set, as they're written. All right, September 25th. We're good for those meeting minutes. All right, so jumping into our first agenda item from tonight, or for tonight. So we have I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but thinking about our town plan, which I think activities for the town plan start in 25. So basically the task or the thought for tonight was to look back at our 2018 town plan and start talking about some of the housing sections that were in that town plan ahead of the meeting. I identified a few of the sections that were in the town plan. And I believe, Virginia, did you have something you wanted to maybe comment on just around the town planning process in general? As I know I haven't been part of that, and I don't know if anyone else here has been part of that process at all in the past.
Sure. Yep.
So
I can do that. Do you want to start or what?
no, go for it if there's any intro as to kind of like just help orient us as to what that process is.
Okay, so the town plan has to be readopted every 8 years. So in 2018, we adopted a town plan, which was a new, pretty much completely rewritten town plan over the previous one. So we are hoping that there's not a lot of changes that have to be made from last time to this time. We're not looking to write a new town plan. We're just looking to update the one that we have, which is pretty good. So in January, the Regional Planning Commission is going to either begin or possibly have completed a review of our current town plan to make suggestions as to where it's deficient relative to new statutes or new needs. So we have engaged with them, and they're on board for doing this review for us that is just for our own use. The Regional Planning Commission has to approve the revisions that we make to the town plan. So it's good to get them involved early, and so they're going to be looking at it as well.
So, Virginia, could I ask,
Sure.
is the Regional Planning Commission the one doing the review and making the suggestions, or is that a different group?
Nope, it's the Regional Planning Commission. So it's
Okay.
planners over there. And whenever any one of so this is the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, whenever any one of the municipalities in Chittenden County is up for reauthorizing their plan, the Regional Planning Commission, 2 years ahead of time or 18 months ahead of time, looks at it and sees where it's deficient based on what has happened over the last, 6 years. The final reauthorization is due by 2026. So probably it would be adopted either at town meeting in 2026, if we're done, we hope, or in the fall of 2026. If you do not re-adopt your town plan and it is allowed to lapse, then there are some negative consequences, like you can't apply for municipal grants. I forget what else, but in 2018, we had a problem because we were trying to pass some new zoning for the Jolena Court project, and we weren't able to do that because we didn't have an updated reauthorized town plan. So we want to be sure this time that we reauthorize it in a timely fashion, which is by 2026. That's why we are starting now. So 2 years ago, the Planning Commission sent out a questionnaire to all the different committees to ask them what goals you have been working on and what you have achieved. Because in the town plan, if you've looked at the end of the town plan, all of the goals and the action items for each committee, each section of the town plan, housing, historic, economic development, natural resources, all of the different sections have goals, and the goals have action items, which are alleged to be things we can actually do. So at the end of the town plan, if you look through that, you will see all of the action items listed and who's responsible for them. So some things are assigned to the select board, some things are assigned to the town administration, some things are assigned to the planning commission, some things are assigned to a housing committee. Well, one of the action items in the 2018 town plan was to form a housing committee. Yay, we did that. So 2 years ago, we sent out a questionnaire to all the committees and to all the people who are responsible for these action items and asked them, what action items have you completed? And what are you working on now? And what new action items would you like to be working on? And what help do you want? And some other questions like that. So we plan to do that again this fall, like now-ish. We're going to send out the same letter to each one of the groups that is responsible for some of the action items, asking them the same questions. So, and amazingly enough, many of the action items had actually been done. We were quite astonished, in fact, that in 2021, many of these things had been done that we had put as action items. So it was pretty fabulous. So I think what I will do is I will also include that report to each committee that we are now asking to update that information. So the housing committee was formed by that point. So they submitted a report with the action items they had completed. Sarah was the chair. This goes to the chair of the committee and they can manage it however they want. Sarah submitted a report. So I can send that back to the housing committee so you can see what she said had been done and what she said you were working on and what then there will be new things that Mark will have to do something about, writing another report, what action items you're working on, what you need. And it can be fairly short. Some people just took the checklist from the back of the town plan and sort of annotated each box that said action items. Those of us who weren't, so I did it for the planning commission, what we were assigned. I am not good enough with the computer to be able to take that chart and actually fill in the little boxes. So I wrote a little narrative. So you can do it however you want. So that's going to happen within the next 2 months. We'll send that out. We will wait for the report to come back from the Regional Planning Commission, who will meet with us. So anybody who wants to come to that meeting can also join in. They'll schedule themselves on a regular Planning Commission meeting. So that's the plan. We have new things that we are responsible for based on, you've heard of Act 47, which used to be called S100, but it is Act 47. It's called the Home Act. So there's a lot in it about housing. And there's stuff in there for planning departments about bylaws, like the zoning document, but there's also stuff in there about new elements that have to be contained within the municipal plan. And there are new elements for the Regional Planning Commission, and they have a huge task. They have a lot more things that they have to put into the regional plan, and they're trying to get their municipalities to kind of align with our information with what they need to put in as well. So it's a little complicated this time, but we're going to start with, what action items have we completed? What new action items do we want? The new things that we are tasked with putting in, one that I can think of off the top of my head is, what is your actual plan for providing housing for low and moderate income folks? So, we can think about what we want to say about that. We will have some kind of statement about that because that's now statutorily required that we put that in the plan. So that's generally the program.
Yeah, I have a question. So obviously in 2018, when the town plan was made, the housing committee didn't exist. How do you foresee in the town plan, would there be like in the chart that you referenced at the end of the line items that are actually physically assigned to the housing committee, or would they still be assigned to the planning commission because we're kind of a subset of the commission off the books? We would be like, hey, can the housing committee work on this? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what you would want to do is you would want to go to the housing section, which everybody, we assume, has done for this meeting. It's like two pages long. It's very short. There's a very short section of action items. They're like 8 or 10. So obviously, since there was no housing committee then, one of the items was to form a housing committee. Check.
Yep.
The other items we need to just look at as a housing committee and say, oh, we'll take that on. We now can take that on. Some of the things would be appropriate for that, and some of them might not be appropriate. So we just need to look at the action items that are actually in the housing section, which are also in the index at the back, the list at the back. But we can say, okay, these are related to housing. In the report that Sarah made in 2021, that's what she must have done. She must have looked at the tasks that were listed in the housing section to see what's appropriate. And maybe there are things in other sections that are appropriate. So you kind of need to peruse the action items and see if there are any from other sections that might be appropriate for the housing committee to take on.
I guess that assumes that we're keeping the same items on here, or would we be adding? I'm assuming we would potentially add new items, right?
Yeah, we could add new items. I mean, that's the
right.
That's the point of the reauthorization every 8 years is to, okay, are these action items still appropriate? Do we need different ones? Are these not suitable anymore? What action items can we put on here? And if we want to have different goals, that's fine too. The idea is to make this section relevant to what has happened over the last 8 years and what we look for going into the future. So, whatever the housing committee takes to be the necessary goals and actions for the future, we would want to put those in there.
Okay. Well,
and I think some committees, like, they assign different people on their committee to different things. So that's one way of doing it. Some, I think the chair just did it. Could be talked about definitely in a committee, like in our housing committee at a meeting that we have, we could say, okay, here are the action items that are here. Are these the ones we want? Whatever.
Well, maybe we can take a quick review of what's actually in the report today. And
Sure.
don't want to look at.
Can you
Yeah, go
look
ahead.
at the page of the housing, the actual housing committee? I mean, that's a good place to start, is to the
Okay.
housing committee at the end of the housing committee. Yep. There are the goals and the action items.
Yes. So here's a page. This is page 30. I did drop the link into the chat here tonight if you don't have the link or you don't want to watch on my screen, on the screen that I have here. So back in 2018, strive to have a diverse, resilient, affordable, and quality housing options for residents and potential residents from all walks of life throughout the town.
Yeah, and one thing I would say about a plan versus bylaws, like the zoning, a plan is very generalized. And in order to get buy-in from the town, since it has to be voted on by the whole town, things are pretty general and, hard to disagree with. It's very hard to get very specific statements in there. That's just the difference between a plan and an actual ordinance. So, that's why it looks like, oh, goal one. Who could possibly disagree with that? Because the plan is mostly kind of like that. Anyway, just a comment there. The
Yeah, so
actions are supposed to be more specific. The actions are actually supposed to be things that we could actually think about doing.
sure. Actions or tactics, like the specific items. Yeah, so updating zoning regulations, identify opportunities for development of a variety of housing types. For example, allowing mixed residential commercial use, higher unit density, or unique accessory housing in certain areas that will be identified during said update. So I think a lot of this work is what the Planning Commission is doing now and had done in some of our downtown sections, right? In terms of updating some zoning regulations, increasing density in I forget the two zones that we did last year.
Yeah. Yeah, the residential commercial zones. But what the housing committee did was very useful during those periods, which was to help set the tone for multifamily housing, to make it more acceptable. We had a booth at the town farmers market,
Okay.
supporting this work and to making it a YIMBY rather than a NIMBY in terms of increased density, that kind of thing. So I think that's an important role, and it would fit in action one. If I were writing it for the housing committee, I would say, well, this is what we did. We were supportive of these efforts and came out, or whatever we can do to help them be accepted, because the zoning is got to be actually accepted by the people. So
Yeah, exactly. And the review of some of the open lands that were possible for development as well. Or some other projects that we had worked on.
yeah,
Um,
and doing the planning work, definitely doing like the demographic work that's going to support this kind of thing. That all would kind of go in there in terms of having an adjunct role.
Continue to support the existence of the mobile home park, support additional affordable housing development. Create a town housing committee. So I'm assuming we would take this off of our update because it has been done, or change this to support the housing committee, maybe to continue to identify needs and partner with organizations, right? Because we've created the thing.
Right. Now
It's
we
now.
need to make it fully functional and, to give it things to do so I would say to further develop the the actions, the activities of a housing committee, and to maybe refine its mission or whatever, I think it should definitely be in there mentioning that we have now a housing committee, and that's a good thing.
Encourage concentrated residential development in areas identified for growth.
Can I back up and make a comment
Yeah.
on number 3 real quick?
Go for it.
Wouldn't back on that, that's kind of what Heinsberg did, I thought, when that was what they said was kind of a key factor in the growth of their housing committee, is that anybody who wanted to do X number of units in Heinsberg had to meet with the housing committee. So it's kind of like trying to enforce something without any teeth. And the housing committee is just a de facto arm of something that doesn't do anything necessarily. Whereas if we were able to have a basic premise with the planning commission's blessing, this is what we're looking for, qualify these developers for us before we get too far through zoning and DRB meetings, XYZ, as we're the experts in local housing. Would that be an appropriate place to structure that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, I think it's totally dependent on the ambitions of this group. You know what I mean? I think we could take on as much responsibility as we wanted. It just is a question of whether we can do it, whether we can keep it up. But yeah, I mean, certainly looking at the activities, the Heinsberg Housing Committee, which is an affordable housing committee, actually, and that's a question about whether our committee is actually an affordable housing committee or just a housing committee. Anyway, they have a champion. They have this guy who's who's previously in the housing business, and he just drives that group. So, I think whatever our ambitions are, it's good to suggest that that's what we want as an action item.
Well, we'd have to add value. In other words, my impression was when the Heinsberg leader came to our meeting was that they want to be advocates for housing efforts, and they want to be able to come to a DRB meeting and say, this is why this is a good idea. This is why we support it, because they've done some research and have some knowledge. So it's important to know, well, what's the value we're adding to help the housing process move along? How would we organize ourselves to be able to do that? It's kind of what you're saying, Virginia, but with a kind of like a, what's the practical value rather than having someone go through yet another gate in order to get to their projects being approved. And I think we need to work on that a little bit as a committee to understand how we could do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the suggestion that we go to DRB meetings and support housing projects, I mean, that's a pretty big commitment. And
yeah,
have to take it seriously. I mean, I think it does add value. I think that all adds value, and it adds to the supportive or environment that is, pushing to have either more housing or more affordable housing, depending on how we're thinking about it. But we would need to be ready to do the research into the project and to come to the meetings and, so yeah, we just need to talk about it and see what the ambition is. But I think those are all suitable ideas for moving forward if we want to boost the usefulness of the housing committee.
Thanks. I agree.
Yeah. And it looks like number 3 is just talking about affordable housing policies, whether it's affordable in the true affordable sense or just affordable to everybody. That's a question that is not really resolved by this statement. But if you're talking about policies that are welcomed by both developers and residents, that seems like a collaborative kind of thing. That means like you're working with the authorities and the developers at the same time, that's a task. So I don't know. Andrew, what do you think? You think that we have the ambition and the ability to follow through on that kind of thing?
It's merely asking a question,
Yeah.
not committing to solving a 50-year crisis. I think that the power of a committee potentially in this framework is I would strongly believe there's two factors that prohibit affordable growth, and it's overbearing state and local zoning regulations, pick any community, and NIMBYs. So you can't control really state legislation with only your vote. That's all you have. But going door to door and just having reasonable conversations with folks about why they might not like something and maybe try as person to person, I think that's the what is it called? Grassroots. The
Mm,
grassroots process is probably more powerful than most anything else that we would be able to do. From experience, from conversations, people don't even want to talk to us on a recorded call because they get trashed. Like I would be very mindful just in my own as a somebody in a self-employed career where I'm public facing. If I say the wrong thing in a place, like I lose business. So that's where it falls in these people, and it just becomes very challenging to. And I think behind closed doors, knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, why?" and asking questions and learning about why they may object from a reasonable standpoint would be very helpful because all it does is cost people money. It costs somebody money at the end, and it doesn't accomplish anything. I really don't think it does.
hmm
I think it creates 3 years to produce a parcel that costs $190,000 and now just raise the cost of every unit $70,000 because that's the permit process. That's crazy. Really is crazy. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think that
Right.
there's often standoffs in public meetings with DRB and developer. There's just clashes so often. I
Right.
see it on our local front porch forum. I've been in Williston DRB meetings. I've been in Essex DRB meetings, and they're overly tensious when somebody who nobody likes comes to bring a conforming project to the table. So how do we make that go away? It doesn't. It seems like if someone's doing a conforming project, oh, great, you're following every rule. Thank you. Here's your signed application. Instead, it spends 3 years in the courts.
hmm So, I mean,
That's
I could see a couple of new action items from what you're saying that could be formulated. One is about the grassroots effort, something along those lines as an action item for this committee. And the other one is to figure out how to make the process between developers and the permitting process. What would it take to make that more collaborative? To find that out. I mean, and obviously developers probably say, well, it's the permit process. But if you truly want to make it collaborative, then we have to have the information as to why it is so contentious. What is it about the permitting process? What is it about the regulations? Is it something about the DRB not showing up because they don't have a quorum, which has been said, or is it, the actual zoning regulations, or so anyway, that would be an investigation that this committee could do. Why is this process so contentious? And maybe talking to the people in Heinsberg would give us some more insight about that. If we developed some really specific questions about that and talk to developers. Anyway, so that would be two action items that I could see coming out of what you just said.
Those sound good to me.
Great.
So we could work on them, we could work on the language and, Andrew, if you wanted to suggest some language, that would be fine. I don't know what Mark's got in line for the process of doing this exactly, but, anyway, I think those are good ideas.
Would you see
Mark.
those as being items to put in this particular report or more in our our charter as a committee or as takeaway? Like, do they float high enough to be in the town plan if we were to talk about those two items?
It's up to us. I mean, we can configure this committee to do what we want. I mean, when it was initially formed, there was a list, the committee had a set of things, goals that they were going after. We can certainly update that, and we can update this. So, yep, getting an echo here.
Okay, great. Anything else that's related more to us? I mean, I don't think we have looked at anything flood hazard related. Obviously, since 2018, I think that has been more impactful to our town residents, floods in general. Share and support information about homes, resources that assist seniors and low mobility residents remaining in their homes.
Well,
Information about programs,
we did,
resources.
where does I'm trying to remember what we were at town meeting and we were trying to get permission to have like a forum or some sense of what are we, I'm so sorry. I know it was only like 6 months ago and I'm like, my memory's failing me, but I remember those flyers that is like for sure imprinted on my memory. We were trying to raise awareness at town meeting, and we were also trying to propose a miscellaneous or additional amendment about having the role of creating a forum or a community conversation about the need for housing. And everybody was like, sure, yeah, go ahead, do that. That sounds great. So we actually got some support at town meeting to do things that have to do with sharing and supporting information about programs and resources. And so in a way, 6 and 7, maybe not so much 8, but we had a general sense less than a year ago that in addition to this developing idea of could we make the permitting process better, can we make the communication process better? So, and that's very much in line with what Andrew was just talking about is how do you have a real conversation with folks? And I'm not sure if going door to door and knocking on people's doors is like completely fruitful. The way people live these days and their work and their busy lives and all the rest of that. But on the other hand, we went to the farmers market, as Virginia pointed out, and we had a couple of good conversations there. Couple. So that's another way to get that, to accomplish that. So I just feel like we did this important thing at town meeting. Could we also build on that in this action plan?
Sure. Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, once again, it's the energy and ambition that we have for this work. I mean, we could put a specific action item, organize a town-wide forum on housing or on affordable housing or, but someone would have to work up a program for that. What exactly are you going to talk about? You can't just like say, what do people think about housing or what do people think about affordable housing? Maybe you have something actually in mind to offer in terms of a place or I don't know, whatever it is. You know what I mean, Connie? You have to have something that we can offer. If we put that in as an action item, organize a town forum on the acceptance of multifamily buildings or of, higher density or I don't know what all else, then we would have a lot of work to do. We would have some work to do. So it really depends on how invested we are in doing this work, I think. We can always put to support the organization, the organizing of a program. I mean, that's what we originally put in for housing when there wasn't a housing committee in 2018 when we wrote this plan. We put these very generic items in there. Support and share information. Well, who could argue with that, you know? But if we want something more specific, it's going to require that we do something actually and do the research and do the work and do the organizing and do the logistics of it. So, yeah, any of these are possible.
It has to match an action or an activity, a vague, you know, call together for it. It doesn't have a productive outcome. And I know we had something in mind when we put that together, and I'm actually looking for the resolution or whatever it was that we brought forward. But I think we built that as a base for helping people so that we could say, we're here because, you know, there's an interest in this. You know, we talked about it to town meeting. Who knows if we'll have town meeting in the future. You know, we shouldn't lose that ability or that opportunity, although I'm in total agreement that it should be specifically focused around a current need or activity or plan or project or something.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so that requires that we work something up to do it, you know, and we have it like make a summer date or whatever. We put a plan together. What exactly are we going to talk about? You know, all of those kinds of things. You know what I mean? Like, are you willing to do that kind of thing? I'm just
yeah.
thinking that as an action item, if you want it to be an action, you have to really grasp it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And it's something we could talk about in the future. We don't have to sort it out right now.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, and I'll say some of these, at least when looking at the matrix or the map in the second half of this report, are let's say assigned to other entities within the town. So some of these like were assigned to these items were assigned to like the town administration and energy coordinator, and you know, I can see some of this weatherization and energy use. Like we have an energy committee, right, within the community, or
we have an energy coordinator, and we have a non-official, the Richmond Climate Action Committee, which is a non-official action committee, but you know, they're not a town entity.
So,
and a little bit, they have the same problem that we have here, in that there's lots of things that energy committee, because I'm a member of it, could do. You know, I mean, around weatherization, around publicizing it, around promoting certain energy strategies, about making the information available about the incentives that are out there for weatherization, understanding the difficulties that come with the transition, the energy transition to all electric. I mean, there's just a huge world of things that could be done. It just takes time and bandwidth and energy to do it. And, you know, so that's an issue.
So are there any, I guess, from folks that read the sections on housing, any other thoughts or ideas as to what might be missing or what we would want to update within those housing sections? Any takeaways?
I guess I have like a workflow question here. Like, what do you imagine this process being for updating this in? Like, or Virginia?
Yeah. So the process is going to be that, you know, maybe by the middle of 2025, we have some feedback from the committees. And by the certainly by the end of 2025, we want to have a pretty good idea of what things we want to change. So, one thing we're going to wait for is the report from the Regional Planning Commission about what is missing. And if I can, give you the information about what Act 47 requires that we're going to have to put in these goals. So that's going to happen, over the next, let's say the next 6 months. We want to try to generate how we want to change the goals.
So we should be doing this in parallel with that report that we'll be getting, telling us what's also now required.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
just starting to think about it, because there's a lot of thinking that is involved in this process. So that's why we're sort of starting to talk about it now, so that in the next couple of months before we get that regional planning report, we can be thinking about it and we can be cogitating on what we think we can do, do we want to change our own mission on our mission statement, for instance, then is going to lead to some goals. Yeah.
And then Mark, for us, like internally, how do you want to run this process of thinking about it and getting that feedback so that we can get it back to the rest of the crew in 6 months?
Haven't quite gotten that far yet. I mean, I think we'll have to, we have a couple of documents. We have our charter, right? And maybe it's, we took a look at that and updated that beginning of this year. So maybe that's a good place to start there. And then from that, kind of coming out of that, like, where do we want to contribute to the action items that are on the town plan, right? How does that bubble up to the town plan? Will be my thought process. And Virginia, like, who's there's the kind of the commentary here, right? And the updates to just the current environs within our town. Is that something the planning commission writes? Is that something, like, who typically updates this? Because I think we have some newer data, right? And things like that.
And whatever data we have would be important, because I think it's mentioned in there about data. And also in Act 47, it mentions that you want your housing program to be supported by data. And originally, we had data and demographics. They haven't been updated, right, Mark? I mean, I don't know that data is updated year by year, working with Regional Planning Commission. I don't think we have anyone who's super interested in the data as we did in the beginning. Didn't we have someone who was really
well, Brandy made a report, and then Ravi got an intern who worked for about 6 months on data, and we have a lot of we had a big update. Maybe it was in 2022. And then we said, oh, we have to figure out how to update this. So it's old, but it's not like terrifically old. It's not bad. And
Connie,
yeah.
Connie, do we have that anymore? I feel like that got lost when we the town moved, and our folder kind of vanished. Unless you have that saved somewhere.
No, I don't think I do. Ravi was the keeper of that, and I assumed it was on a town website where we could find it.
Yeah, and we could check again with Keith to make sure that, because he has all access to all the Revi files. And Revi, who is now the planning director in Winooski, interestingly, might also, he's moved from
Burlington.
From Burlington Transportation. Anyway, he's contactable. We might be able to get it from them if somebody really wanted to track down that information. The other thing that there's going to be new information in terms of the housing targets coming out of the Regional Planning Commission, which is crazy, way out of our ability to even contemplate the number of units that they would like to think that each town, based on their population, can have. I mean, it's just hundreds of units.
Is
per
it gonna be
acre.
broken down by town this time? Like,
Yeah,
I
I
feel
think
like that
it's,
was the hard thing to figure out was what was Richmond's allocation of that, to set a goal.
yeah, it's going to be a goal that's town by town. And to me, what's going to happen is we're going to have to take those numbers and make a statement about how this is not possible for us to do. I mean, not to be like, too negative about the goals that they are setting. But Keith and I have talked about these goals and they're just unreasonable. So, I think we need to deal with that in our town plan. We need to say, well, regional planning has made these goals. This is not reasonable. This is what we need to do in order to even try to approach any of these kinds of numbers. And that gets back to Andrew's point about, developers and what they need and how this could be a more collaborative process, because if we're not having any developers who want to develop in Richmond, then we're not going to have any of those units. So that's an issue that is going to have to be grappled, and that information is going to come from regional planning, I assume, when they submit these town-sized housing goals.
So my understanding, and maybe my perusing of Act 47 wasn't thorough enough, but if we don't in Richmond adopt what we're told to adopt, don't we lose opportunity for certain funding mechanisms? If we say, no, we can't possibly do that, sorry, there's a funding mechanism within Act 47 I read. No?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little unclear, and I think Act 47 wasn't maybe completely thought out about
No, I know, but I'm just
all of
saying, like
these
your point
things.
before, where if you don't have an active town plan, the town can
Yeah,
lose opportunity for grants. If
well,
you don't adopt what the Regional Planning Commission says, I believe that Richmond would lose out on opportunity in the future to reap benefits, whether it can happen or not. But if it's not within the town plan and you snub your nose at it, I think we would lose opportunity.
yeah. Well, the town plan, our town plan does have to be approved by the Regional Planning Commission. So if they don't approve it or we don't adopt it, then we do lose those granting opportunities. Now, whether you can, I'm just trying to read to you, for instance, what it says here. And, there may be ways of saying this without saying we're going to have 600 more units of housing built in Richmond over the next 5 years. I mean, what is that worth, that kind of statement, even if we put it in the plan and regional planning adopts it and we say we're going to do it and we can't possibly do it? I just think we ought to be real and in our town plan discuss the problems that we have. Here's what it says about the plan. You need a housing element. Okay, we got a housing element that shall include a recommended program for public and private actions to address housing needs as identified by the Regional Planning Commission pursuant to this act. The program should use data on year-round and seasonal dwellings, so we need data, and include specific actions to address the housing needs of persons with low income or persons with moderate income, and account for the permitted development standards as described in this. So we're doing that in the zoning. We're putting in the required standards. But, as far as us saying what the specific actions are to address housing needs, I think we're going to have to be creative and say things like, we're trying to identify the breakdown between developers and the permitting process. That's how we're going to address this. And I can't see that regional planning could possibly object to that. You know what I mean? That's our plan.
That's that's fine. That's a different statement than what you said before, which was, we can't do it and we're not going to do it. Go pound sand.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was just my initial reaction. We just have to make up a plan of some kind that's go door to door and persuade people to have this, you know what I mean? Anyway, I just wanted to say that I thought their numbers were whack. So there you are. There, you don't quote me on it.
Okay.
So it sounds like we would want to wait for feedback from the CCRPC. We would want to keep thinking about how can we learn how to make this process more productive for everybody involved. We can
And Andrew's
have
going to write a goal for that or an action item. Yep. Sounds good.
and we're going to have a communication piece, which might go from grassroots or include townwide forums. But I don't know that we have to specify that now, but we want to definitely do that. And we're interested in finding out what happened to the data that was created that described our town's housing stock and a whole ton of other stuff. And see if we could plan for a regrouping of that or re-upping of that. Those are the things that I've pulled out of our conversation. Does that include everything?
Sure. And then whatever else people can think of over the next couple of months while we're doing this thinking. And then, you know, I mean, maybe next year we'll want to refine some of those down to actual programs that we want to do or something. You know, those more general statements.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Nick, since you had asked a question earlier about the process, do you have any thoughts or ideas on where we would go from here with some of these action items or some of the like that planning process, right?
Yeah, I was just bringing it up because I think the best thing that we could get out of this meeting is making sure we know what expectations we're trying to hit over the next 6 months. So, like, I would love to see a goal of like it on our next town meeting. We have read our charter, understand what we want, have a couple ideas on how we want to update it, if we want to update it, know what that looks like, have sort of compared that to the existing goals and objectives that were in the town plan that we were just reviewing. That way we can see like, okay, this is how we're changing as the housing committee. And these are the new types of structures that we're looking at. And, you know, maybe next month we could actually have a list of like theoretical ones. These aren't, they don't have to be official, but that way we can be like, okay, let's review that in the context of what we're doing there. So I was just like thinking about how we can nail it down a little bit more so that we're like, okay, you know, we have 6 months, but that means that we have 5 meetings to do that effectively, given that we do one a month. So that's not a lot. That's a lot of time. It's not a lot of like time for us as a group to actually do this. And I think we all have slightly different things that we're excited about. You know, Andrew definitely felt some of the passion from that. Like, how do we get this to actually work with our community? Having someone that wants to go door to door is a rare thing. So that's pretty awesome. And so like thinking about how we can get the rest of us to find that energy, whether it's, you know, Connie saying that she wants to go to the town village and do that during the or the town green. That's great. Like, I think one place that I'd be interested in helping is making sure that the developers that are looking at Richmond know all the resources, and we have sort of a definitive guide to resources to help them build multifamily units in Richmond. And how do we actually get them that approval process? I think that happened with the dairy place where they didn't get their permit. They got their permits, but they didn't qualify for any funding. Figure out where that breakdown is, see if we can identify like what that actually looks like should a new developer come in. I think that ties a little bit to what Andrew was saying about like when they come through, we don't even see what that data looks like right now. Like, we can't help them because we don't even know necessarily what that looks like. And then Virginia was saying that's because we're not going to those meetings. And so I think there's a bridge to cross there as well. How do we, whether it's attending those meetings or getting that information forwarded to us so that we can, try and help developers that are trying to help with affordable housing in Richmond. Anyway, that was a quick burn down of what I've been stacking up over here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like the idea of having a timeline of some kind. That's helpful. Do this by this date, do this by this date, because the time just does fly. So, and I think Andrew was going to get us some developers, but the meeting times changed and all that, so that was a problem. But I think that was a good thing. I'm hoping that we can still do that. And then at some point, if the permitting process is perceived as, a barrier in general, I think at some point this committee
So I've actually
we'll have to just be we'll have to take it on to talk to the planning commission. I mean, it's complicated for me because I'm on both boards, but if this is a permitting process is a significant problem, then, and this committee feels like it is a barrier to housing, then there needs to be a dialogue that's not just supporting what the planning commission is doing. Now, I know that up until now, that's been a role of this committee because the planning commission has been trying to allow for more housing, but I don't know if that makes any sense to people, but this committee can have its own perspective on the planning commission, and I think that would be healthy. Yeah, go ahead.
What I heard from Andrew actually, and Andrew, you should certainly correct me or Virginia here. It wasn't that the permitting process was these were projects that were already conforming projects that you've had, and so it sounds to me like the permitting actually wasn't the problem there. It's actually that there's these other legal battles at the end. So from what I heard from Andrew, it wasn't a permitting issue. It just got caught right at the end of like the permitting or like in the same kind of legal area as the permitting, even though they were permitted or could be permitted. It's that they had neighbors and other residents coming in trying to block it without basically trying to not have it in their backyard. Right? Is that right?
Yeah, Virginia and the folks that I have that I'm in relations with had no interest in coming into a Richmond call because they're going through a court legal process right now, and they have no comment on any of that. And nothing they've proposed has been non-conforming that would not abide by Richmond code or state permits or Richmond permits. It's people just complain, and they've often utilized not in the character of the neighborhood tools, which are no longer valid, but this all predates Act 47, and Act 47 eliminated the S100, whatever you want to call it, eliminated the not in the character of the neighborhood objections. But they're stuck in environmental court and it's costing them $100,000, so they don't want to talk. So that's why I can't get them on.
Okay. That's
why I want to go door to door and talk some sense into people. And it's not door to door where you have to knock on 200 doors. I don't need to be belittled for it, really. It's talking to 3 people, because literally 1 or 2 people in our community are the ones that are tampering that down and drastically slowing down the process. It's not 100 people, it's 9. And everything they're doing is like by the book and by the code. So that's why one of the reasons, not the only reason, one of the reasons we don't have more housing is because the one person has the power to do so. And that's nothing that Richmond can do to fix that. We can't fix this on a housing call, and the planning commission can't fix it, and the DRB can't fix it.
I mean, well, because Act 47 has now disallowed the use of the character of the neighborhood arguments, I mean, it's possible that we could mention that as an action item, is to, first of all, educate people that that's the case, that the character of the neighborhood argument is no longer legitimate by the law, an educational effort along that, or even to, make sure that it's not more than 9 people. You know what I mean? Or to try to counteract that. So anyway, just a thought about that, about the fact that now you can't use altering the character of the neighborhood. And of course, the character of a neighborhood does occur throughout many documents, many zoning documents. And we now have to be very careful about what we say about the character of the neighborhood. Yeah, so dealing with that somehow, I don't know, just a thought.
Okay. So we have it, just looking at a time check, it's 10 after 8. And we were going to get an update from the Planning Commission. So I don't know, Virginia, if you had anything else you wanted to add, but then also look at kind of our schedule and updating meetings and what we want to discuss during those meetings. So maybe that would be a good opportunity to kind of wrap up at the end and talk about what are some of the action items that we want to work on, and kind of help map this out a little bit, this piece a little bit as well. That sounds good to folks. Virginia, did you have anything you wanted to update from the Planning Commission?
Yeah, so I'll try to be really quick so we don't spend too much time with that. So we're working on 3 things right now that we have to finish that are on their way to the select board. The select board, the Planning Commission is in charge of the zoning and any amendments. We have to have Planning Commission hearings on public hearings, and then it goes to the select board to be adopted. So there are 3 things that we're currently working on before we start working on this town plan and some other things, which are going to be complicated in 2025. The first one is the village residential neighborhoods. And this concerns the Housing Committee in that we have introduced the things that are required by Act 47 into that zoning, for which there is some pushback. You have to allow duplexes wherever you allow single-family homes, regardless of the density, and you have to allow 3 and 4 unit buildings anywhere that you allow single-family homes, regardless of the density. Act 47 also required that you have a minimum density in areas served by water and sewer of 5 units per acre. That means that the minimum lot size in areas served by municipal water and sewer, which is these areas in the village, is 0.2 acres, a fifth of an acre. That means that you can have a 3 to 4 unit building on 0.2 acres. So you can imagine there's some pushback about that, because if that was actually built out, it would be 20 units per acre. It wouldn't be 5 units per acre, it would be 20 units per acre. But we have to put it in, our hands are tied, it's probably a good thing. This committee probably ought to be in favor of this, because it's increasing density in the place where it's a good place to increase density, which is where water and sewer and other services, roads and so forth, are located and more walkable. So at our next meeting, which is next week, we were told by the select board to revise the zoning to allow these new changes, because Act 181, which clarified the changes of Act 47, came in after we had already sent this package to the select board. So we now have it back at our meeting. We're going to make sure that everybody understands that these statutory changes are being made, that you can have a duplex or a 3 to 4 family unit on a 0.2 acre lot. That's the way it is. The law changes. That is the way the zoning department has to administer any permits that come in. So that's what's going to be in our zoning ordinance. That's one thing. We hope to finish that up and finalize it at our next meeting. It'll go back to the select board, who may or may not hold another public hearing about it. They may just adopt it. There's not much other controversy about the village residential neighborhoods. That's like the north up in the Tilden Baker area, and then the south down around the round church. The second thing that doesn't have much to do with this committee is the flood hazard. the parks people want to be able to put the playground up on the plateau where the band shell is, and they want to take the band shell away and put up a pavilion. We don't know how the public feels about that. We're hoping they will find that out. We are rewriting zoning to allow those structures to be moved up onto the plateau, just so that they don't keep getting damaged and that we keep having to make repairs. There are 3 structures in question: the playground structures, the restroom building, and the band shell. So we're calling those pre-existing structures. They are all in the floodway, which is where the actual water rushes when there's a flood. They're not in the periphery, which is like Esplanade Street, where there's flood water, but it's not the floodway. The channel doesn't go there. So in the floodway itself, we would like to be able to move these structures up onto the plateau. And it's been relatively complex to do that, just because of people have a lot of feelings about it. We're only doing it for pre-existing structures. We're not allowing any new structures to come into the floodway in the park, because that doesn't make any sense to put new structures in the floodway that are now going to be damaged and we're going to have to pay more for. So there's that. Doesn't really have much to do with this group.
Virginia, when
Yeah.
you say plateau, do you mean the place where the band shell currently is?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So the idea would be, I mean, what the Parks Committee wants to do is to take the band shell away. We don't know if that's going to be popular or not, whether it's an icon or an eyesore. This is a debate right now out in the town. But they would like to put a smaller pavilion there and then to put the playground there. And the bathroom, one bathroom, which is flood resistant, and get rid of the other bathroom, possibly have a porta potty down by the baseball fields. And the farmer's market would be down where the playground now is, because that's temporary. It comes and goes. We don't need to worry about that with floods. They're not going to put it up if there's going to be a flood. So, and that's a resilience issue. You know, towns are encouraged to think about resilience and what they can do to cut their continuing costs down. So we certainly don't want to fill the floodplain with any more structures, because that makes it worse if you don't allow the water to go where it needs to go.
Didn't Gary Bresser just author a recent Richmond Times, like 2-pager about the band shell? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah,
It's
a
with
history
fond
of the band
memories.
shell.
Yeah, the history. Okay, I get it now. Yes, there's
He's on the
controversy.
icon side, and then there are people
Yes.
who are on the eyesore side. So
Got it. Got
the
it.
planning
Got it.
commission is not taking that problem on. That's not our problem. We're allowing you to put a pavilion there instead of the band shell if you want, as long as it's not any bigger than the band shell. If it's smaller, that's fine, or if it's different looking, that's fine. So whatever people want to do about that. And do people want to spend the money to do anything about the band shell? You know? No. Doesn't it make sense just to fix it if it's not safe, which the parks people claim it's not safe? Fix it, you know. You're not going to take it away and put a whole new structure up for less than it costs to just fix that band shell as it is. So anyway, if you want to get involved in that, that's a town-wide thing.
No, that's good. Thanks. I'd like to know about it. I
Icon
appreciate it.
versus eyesore, and you know, the expense problem.
Mhm.
Want to make it, and they want, originally the parks people wanted to put other things in the park, which would be nice, but they're going to then be maintenance expenses. So we're kind of pushing back about that and trying not to allow anything new to be put in the park, even though it would be lovely, you know, whatever. Okay, so then the third thing is the Jolena Court, and this is a complicated issue for this committee, because Jolena Court is planning its second building, 31 apartments. We have had a requirement that they have commercial on the first floor. We are taking that away. We understand that's not viable to have commercial requirements on the first floor of a building. You can't get money for it, because commercial is, who knows what the market is. So, but they also want increased density, which makes sense to certain members of the Planning Commission, including myself, we feel they should just get more density so that they can actually put a building that provides more units. The rest of the Planning Commission has been very resistant to that, and the only way we found to go forward was to allow them to have more density only as density bonuses. So they could either make a certain number of affordable units, which is good from the point of view of providing affordable housing, but not very good if it prevents any housing. You know, if it reduces the income that they can possibly make, it's going to be very difficult for them to get money to do that building. Or they can put adaptable units, which is like grab bars in the bathroom, which maybe they'll do, I don't know. Or they can provide some public parking. Personally, I do not think they're going to take any of these density bonuses. I think it's making it more difficult to make housing. I think it's putting barriers, but I have not been able to make the persuasive argument to the Planning Commission that that is the case. So what we're going to talk about on our November 20th meeting is this density bonus scheme. And my feeling is that they're probably, for 31 units, even without a commercial requirement, they're not going to be able to build that building. But so how this committee wants to, if you want to weigh in on that somehow, I don't know what the way that, you know, you all would want to weigh in on that.
Why would they not do adaptable units?
Yeah, well, so they might do adaptable units. It's what you get is you get one market rate unit for 2 adaptable units. So they might be willing
So
to.
you sent that to me a couple weeks ago. I talked to a couple people, like just on
Yeah.
a cost perspective.
Yeah,
It's nominal. Like it doesn't
It's-
cost them unless I'm missing something. Maybe there's like fire safety code that I'm not aware of about like fire alarms being in certain places and alerts and whatever. But it's so cheap to make a place that's adaptable. If you do it during construction, if it's post construction, it's a nightmare.
yeah. Well, maybe they
But
will.
what they should do that. They should make the whole building adaptable and take as
Yeah.
many as they can.
Yeah. Well, so they would like to have 15 more units for that building. They have 31 right now. They would like to have 15 more. So to do that, you know, you would have 10 adaptable units plus 5 market rate units. So maybe they will do that. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, well, you tell
If
them.
they don't, find them a better financial advisor if they don't.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't think that any financial people would object to that they would feel that that was problematic from a, you know, from a bankruptcy point of view. We did have to go through a process of not calling them senior apartments, because at first, what came out of the demographic study from Brandy Sexton was that what people wanted were senior units. But because of age discrimination laws, it turns out you can't do that except under very special exemptions. So we are finally getting rid of calling them senior and just calling them adaptable, which is some accessible ADA features and some just adaptable features. So great, maybe they'll do that. I don't know. They've given up on us. Buttermilk is disgusted with the Planning Commission and the time that we've taken, which is, you know, has added to their time for sure. And it's been rather contentious on the Planning Commission. But I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it. I was not able to make the correct persuasive argument. So that's what we're working on, and that will be, like I said, at our November 20th. We'll talk about that again, and we hope to move that to the select board, possibly. So that's it, Mark.
Is the vote close on increasing density there, or is it feeling outnumbered on the Planning Commission in terms of?
Well, they're willing to increase the density if they take one of these options. There are going to be three options for density bonuses. One is if you make 4 affordable units perpetually affordable, if you make one perpetually affordable unit, you can have 4 market rate units, because that is a significant sacrifice. So, however, in Heinsberg, some of them say it's not, the cost is turning out to be, for some of these units, not that different for making them affordable on the 80% chart. But there is a paperwork question. You have to vet the tenants, and there's the in perpetuity part. So anyway, that's one option they can take, and they can mix and match with these different density bonuses. One affordable gives you plus 4. So for 15, they could put 3 affordable units and have, the rest be market rate. Or you could do the adaptable, which is if you put 2 adaptable, you get 1 market rate. And the other one is you dedicate some public.
Is it the other round? You get 1 adaptable, you get 2 market rate. That's what I think we heard last meeting.
No, you get,
No.
if you make 2 adaptable, you get 1 market rate.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. And if you give 5 public parking spaces to the town of Richmond, if you lease them 5 public parking spaces, you get 1 market rate unit. They have told us, Buttermilk, that they do not want to give up any of their parking because of future building. Now, what future building is going to consist of is a question. They will not have any more residential density if they use it all up in this building, which they're planning to. So they would have to come back and go through this whole process again with the planning commission if they wanted more residential density. Or they could put, they could subdivide it and sell it and put 3 and 4 unit buildings on it, or, some other thing. Or they could put commercial enterprises. Is there going to be any more development there? We don't know, certainly beyond building 2. Their experience hasn't been very good in Richmond with trying to get what they need. So anyway, that's Jolene.
Like parking. They don't like parking for that very reason, because it prohibits the long-term value on an appraisal report for that land. So if they want to get money in the future and they have dedicated parking to Richmond, they go to a bank and the bank says, well, I'm sorry, your land could be worth $4 million, but it's only worth 2 because you rented all this parking out. So it's not about what they want to do in the future necessarily. It's about their ability to leverage the property and maximize the future return. Parking kills properties. It kills. There's too much impervious surface and too much space.
Yeah. So, well, the town doesn't really like the idea anyway. Pete, he doesn't really like it. I mean, it's kind of this little orphan parking in back there that is the town, and who is responsible if, it's misused somehow. The developer is supposed to be, I don't know. This was the compromise that the planning commission made, was to offer this. Some of us don't even think there's really a parking problem in Richmond. So anyway, we are going to offer that, and we are kind of hoping that the developer doesn't elect it, and it sounds like it's not going to be popular. So that's good. That's fine. They can do the affordable, the adaptable units, or the 3 affordable units for their 15. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. And
Great. Well, thank you for that, Virginia. Anything else? Good.
Nope, that's good. Good enough.
Okay. Awesome. So, looking at our schedule, I'll just share my screen one more time. This is the schedule I had drawn up last time. I believe we're here at the October 30th meeting. Just a reminder, we had to adjust our November and December meetings due to the holiday. So I believe I have these correct, Connie, the 12th and actually November 12th and November 12th, or December 12th for our next 2 meetings that we had. Let me just update this. but we are also in
No,
parallel.
no, I have the 14th for November. Could you check that, Mark?
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I
the
thought,
12th is a Tuesday.
yeah, we had adjusted a couple of the times just because
Yep, the
they
4th,
both.
November 14th at 7.
Okay.
Um,
I thought I saw an email from you that said the 14th no longer worked and we moved it to the 12th.
Man, I'll have to go back and look.
So we will need to
So sorry.
confirm that.
Okay, the December 12th one is, yes, also at 5:30. Yes, I agree with that one. Let me go look at my emails. I'm so sorry if I messed up on that.
So in parallel, we had also been working on kind of this strategy document as well. And I know Andrew had done some work on kind of filling out the water and sewer section. And then we were going to talk about the development and community support, which I think that is you. And then talking through zoning recommendations, which we had. Did we have Matt and Virginia on that?
Is Matt still on the housing committee?
Yes.
I
Okay.
don't think he officially resigned. I think because he's on the
DRB
RB
is
now.
meeting
But
tonight. So, yeah.
yeah, obviously there's a conflict tonight. I think that could be helpful, helping to be a conduit between our committees as well as to what's going on in the DRB, right? Similar to your role,
Yep.
Virginia. So what is new that's not represented here is talking about the town plan. And maybe we need to revisit the town plan in our February session after the community Virginia County Regional Planning Commission has a chance to provide their feedback. So you think by end of February we would have an idea of what our feedback, what that feedback is from the RPC.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, I kind of like Nick's idea of talking about at the next meeting or maybe the December meeting, what tentative, what people are tentatively thinking about these goals. I mean, I think if we wait all the way till February to talk about it again, it's not enough to,
Yeah,
we're
so maybe we
looking
also
to the
review
summer to have something done. That kind of doesn't leave very much time.
maybe next November we review our charter between now and November and we talk about that specifically. And then in December, kind of draft out our the goals that we want to potentially include in the town plan. Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, it'll be all pretty tentative, I think, but it's a start.
Or is there a step in the middle there that we're missing?
That's okay.
Mark, I can confirm that it's Thursday, November 14th. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Does that look decent? And then we'll look out maybe March or April, talk about our finalize housing goals.
Yeah, I mean, maybe on December 12th, it's just that people are going to bring their own ideas to the meeting, so people bring their ideas, and whether we actually draft new goals and action plans, I don't know if we'll get that far, but at least people will have brought something. And I'll try to send out Sarah's report to this committee. I do notice that she said, which action items have you completed? And she says none.
Oh.
But she does list some things they're working on, what we were working on, I guess, at that time. So it's, I'll send that out.
Mark, I captured everything up through January 22nd, zoning recommendations with Matt in Virginia. Was there anything after that?
February, kind of the finalizing that strategy document and then reviewing feedback from the Regional Planning Commission.
Got it. Thank you.
From the town plan.
Got it.
And then maybe in
Thanks.
March, we start drafting
Mm-hmm.
our town plan goals.
Goals and action items. I mean, can think about how specific we want to get.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, next meeting, or no, we're not there yet quite.
No, I think we're set. Anything else we're missing?
I think that's good. So we're on to other business.
Yes. Any other business?
Okay. So we've got the meeting, we've got the proposed agenda to include. So I think you took care of everything.
Okay. Well, then I think we're set for the evening. So we'll see everyone back here November 14th, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Yay. And Keith or Duncan will tell us which channel we're using or which Zoom link we're using, because that's not necessarily consistent. But so far so good. Okay. We're all set. Thanks everybody. It's fun to see you all. I
Thanks
learned a
all.
Very
lot.
much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
You.
Right.
Yep.
Well, bye-bye.
See you next time.